We will praise thy holy name forever. We will Lord and magnify thy name forevermore. We will praise thy holy name forever. We will Lord and magnify thy name forevermore. Forevermore, forevermore.
The Churches of Christ of the North Texas area present The Truth in Love.
Today we have a special program for teenagers and their parents. Stay tuned.
How precious is the book divine, by inspiration given. Bright as a lamp is grace that shine to guide my soul to heaven. Holy Bible, book divine, precious treasure thou art mine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. It sweetly cheers my drooping heart in this dark vale of tears. Light to my life it still imparts and quells my rising fears. Holy Bible, book divine, precious treasure thou art mine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home.
Good morning. I'm David Roper, evangelist with the Brown Trail Church of Christ and your host for The Truth in Love. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, our program today is a special one for teenagers and their parents. So if you're a teenager watching the program, go get mom and dad. If you're a parent of a teenager, you'll want to get him or her. Our speaker is a young man himself, John Tyson Jr. John has worked extensively with young people. He just recently moved to Lubbock, Texas to work with the students at Texas Tech and Lubbock Christian College. And now, here's John.
Good morning. The Three Princes of Serendip is a fairy tale. It tells a story of three fellows who go about searching for certain things, but find other things instead. Those things that they found actually provided them with happiness. From this story we have the word serendipity. Serendipity is finding something that we're not really searching for, making a fortunate discovery by accident. There are a lot of things in life that are serendipities. The first thing I think of is my golf game. I play golf once or twice a year and usually donate 2 or 3 balls to the golf course. I often think about the fellow who's walking along the side of the fairway and finds my golf ball instead of his. I'm happy to be able to donate a golf ball, but you know, it's a serendipity. He really wasn't searching for it, but he found something that was very fortunate. There are a lot of serendipities in life. A lot of famous discoveries were serendipities. Columbus was searching for a western route to Asia, and he stubbed his toe on the Americas. Edward Jenner was searching and found a smallpox vaccine. Louis Pasteur found the pasteurization process as an accident. Charles Goodyear produced vulcanized rubber purely as an accident. And the telephones that we used were an accident found by Alexander Graham Bell. But perhaps one of the most interesting is by Alexander Fleming. The penicillin that we use that provides us with so much healing power was found because Fleming was interested and fascinated by the way the mold eated up certain substances in a petri dish. Life itself really is a serendipity. As we search for joy and happiness in life, we look in so many places, but so often the things we look at provide us with more heartache than pleasure. We live in a hard-driving world where goals plus work equals success. But that doesn't always provide us with joy and happiness. John 10, verse 10, Jesus said, "I came that they might have life and have it abundantly." Then in Luke the 17th chapter he said, "Whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will gain it." It doesn't really make sense, does it? In order to gain life, you must lose life. but that's the way it really works. There are several places we look for happiness. I suppose you could probably add them up and put them into at least 4 categories: possessions, popularity, power, and pleasure. But when you really get right down to it, they satisfy us for a while, but really they don't provide us with enduring happiness. Marcus Dupree was a 19-year-old athlete at the University of Oklahoma. You probably remember him a couple of years ago. He was a star on the Sooner football team. At the age of 19, he had a book written about him. He'd played before a national television audience several times. He was the hero of Norman, Oklahoma. But suddenly he disappeared from the team. He dropped out, and a few days later the Dallas Morning News quoted him as saying this: "The things I thought that were important in life, playing on TV, winning the Heisman Trophy, playing at a school of OU's tradition, aren't so important to me anymore. The important thing is to be happy. Life is too short to be as unhappy as I was. You can have all the fans in the world and not be happy." I think Marcus Dupree probably made a wise choice. He finally realized that where he was looking for happiness was providing him nothing but heartache. Where do you find joy in life? How do you find that serendipitous discovery? Well, I think there are several places. The first place is in simple things. A story is told of a man who spent an hour trying to get his son's pet frog out of a very deep shaft. He first sent a rope down with a noose that he'd worked hard to create. He then tried a long stick with a scoop on the end. He tried several other things that were very complicated. Nothing seemed to work. He went home frustrated. 5 minutes later, his son came in with the frog. The father was astonished. "How did you get the frog out?" he said. It was simple. He used the garden hose and poured water into the shaft, floated the frog to the top. Sometimes it's the simple things in life that make a real difference. Matthew the 13th chapter in verses 31 and 33, Jesus tells us of 2 very brief stories. He tells us about the mustard seed and the leaven, both of which are very small items, but they grow and create very great results. Sometimes the little things also can destroy us. In Matthew the 25th chapter, we read the story of the fellow who went away, and he gave his money to 3 different men to hold and keep while he was gone. The money was called talents. To one man he gave 5 pieces, to another 2, and to another 1. Now the 2 men who had the most money invested it, and when the fellow who owned the money came back, he had more than he had when he began. But the fellow with only 1 talent hid it. He said he was afraid of what his master would do if he lost the money. As a result, the master condemned him. It wasn't because he had a little, but because he didn't use it. Sometimes the small things in our lives, if left unattended, can destroy us, can eat us up, and create the greatest tension and strife. There are several little things that we can do that bring us joy. Include someone in your plans. Maybe you're going someplace all alone. Decide to take someone with you who needs a friend, who needs some help. Do something that you enjoy in life. Talk about things that you enjoy in life. Do unusual things. Do something that you usually do in a different place. Maybe you spend every afternoon at the pizza parlor. Try going to the hamburger stand instead. Rearrange your schedule. Maybe you can go to work in a different route or try a different road to school. So many little things in life can enrich us and provide us with simple joys and pleasures that we never thought were possible. But little things aren't the only things that provide us with joy in life. We also find that richness and abundance by doing worthwhile work well. A French writer once wrote, "It is using a pickaxe to no purpose that makes life a prison." Think about it. When do you become the most bored in life? Usually it's when you're doing something that you think is so insignificant and yet it's so tedious. It's tiring and boring. When you feel you have no purpose in what you're doing. But you know, we're challenged in the Scriptures to do well in whatever we do. Paul said, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. It takes a big person to do even the small things well, to take something that's boring and tedious and to make it into something that's meaningful. But many times that provides us with joy and pleasure. We know we've done a good job at what we've done. There's not really a job shortage in our world today. I think if you ask any employer that's searching for good workers, what he'll tell you is there's a shortage of people who are willing to do their work well. I'll guarantee you, if you're looking for a job, perhaps a summer job some year, or a job after school, you'll find much more joy and pleasure. You'll also get a better job if you'll do whatever it is you do with all your might. One of the biggest things that we can do in our lives is to give our lives to a cause that's greater than ourselves. To find something that means more than just me and give ourselves to it. Everyone has been impressed with the secretary on the telephone who answers with a crisp hello. Can I help you today? You've gone to the department store and seen the salesman who has said, how can I help you today? And has been most efficient and most helpful as he tried to service you. All those things, so small, mean a great deal. And by investing ourselves and doing worthwhile work well, we provide joy and happiness in our lives. And the tedious, boring jobs can also be meaningful as well. Not only do we find pleasure in those two areas, we find joy and happiness in life in the pursuit of life. So often we think the only pleasure comes when we achieve something. But you know, the real joy comes when you pursue. Robert G. Allen is a multi-millionaire real estate investor. He's written 2 books that are bestsellers. In his most recent book, he has a title of a chapter, I Hate Real Estate. Now that sounds unusual for a fella who's made millions of dollars in real estate. But the point of the chapter is that the pleasure and the joy and the happiness was in the pursuit, not in the achievement. Once he had the real estate, it was no more fun. It became boring and tedious. Christ summarizes our search for joy in a series of statements that we often call the Beatitudes. It's found in Matthew the 5th chapter. There are 8 different categories of joy or beautiful attitudes that he describes. Read those over sometime on your own. Notice that all 8 of those are processes. Being poor in spirit, mourning, being meek, hungering and thirsting after righteousness, being merciful, being pure in heart, being peacemakers, and being persecuted for righteousness' sake. Each one of those things takes time. They're not just an achievement. They're an ongoing part of life. Life is meant to be lived, not just achieved. And as Christ would have us live life, He would have us live it abundantly and seek and search ways to be happy. But not only do we find happiness in the pursuit, we also find true joy in being others-centered. There is nothing worse in this world than a person who always thinks about himself. Have you ever been talking with someone and all they ever do is talk about what they've done? Isn't that boring? Can you imagine living a life where every thought is invested in what you are and what you do? I was recently conversing with a fellow who directs a mental health and mental retardation facility. He talked about a special program that they have for individuals who are minimally retarded. The philosophy behind this program is to put people into the marketplace, to give them a job with other people who are considered normal mentally. The reason for this is that when people are told how bad they are or how they cannot do a job well, they begin to really believe it. And even though there may be some ability there that's not cultivated, they don't search for it. They don't work on it. But when they're challenged with an opportunity to change, to be something different, to fit into society, they usually do a very good job. Matthew the 26th chapter, the Jews confronted Christ about death and taxes. In verses 37 through 40, He's asked, what is the greatest law of all? Jesus says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. We often think of those laws as New Testament laws, but they're not. They're as old as God Himself. If you read back in the laws, Deuteronomy, you find God expressing those same two laws to Moses and to the Jews. In fact, Jesus says that all of the laws are hinged upon those two. It doesn't matter what we think of as rules and regulations in life. If they're worthwhile, if they're helpful, if they're productive, they're based upon those two premises, that we love God first and we love others as ourselves. How do we look outwardly in life? How do we get away from our own shell and see other people first? One, don't expect things in return. So many times when we make a deal in life, we're always wondering what we're going to get out of it. Decide to do something for someone else and don't expect anything in return. Just do it because you know it's good, it's right. You know you ought to do it. Don't worry if anyone ever tells you, you did a good job, or you get repaid for what you did. Just do what you think is right. Secondly, be patient. The world wasn't created in a day, and any relationship that we have takes time. Anything that we do that's worthwhile takes time. You've got to be patient with people. You've got to give them time to change, to understand. Thirdly, express yourself, even though you may be rejected. Nobody is given complete acceptance. All of us are rejected from time to time. But sometimes those rejections are the things that turn us into the great successes. It doesn't matter if someone really doesn't care what you say or think. If it's worthwhile, if you believe in it, if it's right, express yourself. When you're rejected, come back again. But there's a final area that I think is even more important than all these others. And we've touched on it in each different section. And that's developing the spiritual dimension of our lives. Tom Wolfe is a writer who gave us the term the me decade. He was talking about the 1960s, a time of great upheaval in our nation, when people began to turn inwardly and think about themselves, perhaps more than any other time in our nation. And the whole point behind this phrase, the me decade, was to suggest that people have turned away from religion, turned away from so many of the traditional values, and looked in other directions for help and for happiness. And during that time and in the recent years, there has been a turn away from religion in our lives. Preachers are not seen as the great leaders they once were. Religionists are mocked and scoffed. But also as a result, our lives have changed, and not for the better. In a recent poll by the Connecticut Mutual Life Insurance Company, it seems to indicate that perhaps we're having a resurgence of religion. It's a little easier to believe in God. According to this poll, 74% of Americans say they're religious. 73% feel God loves them. And 50% frequently pray or go to worship. 45 million Americans say that they are intensely religious. Perhaps we are coming out of a time where religion was a mockery. Maybe it is a little easier to believe in God. But just because it's easier, it shouldn't change our attitudes. Our spiritual dimension will always be with us. It doesn't matter what the philosophers, the scientists say. that's still a very important part of our lives. The psalmist of old said, "Great peace have those who love thy law. Nothing can make them stumble." Then Solomon, perhaps the greatest pursuer of pleasure ever in the history of man, he chronicles all of his pursuits in the book of Ecclesiastes. And then when he concludes and looks back over his life and all the wealth and the wondrous ways he's chased pleasure, he says, "Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." The spiritual dimension of life is the part of life that gives us true meaning. It gives us direction. It helps us to understand who we are and where we're going and why we are here. The only person in the world who could have said these words, Jesus Christ, made this statement, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Where do you find real peace and joy and happiness in life? You won't find it by searching in possessions, in pleasure, in power or popularity. You find it when you seek out Christ. When you do the little things in life. When you do something that is worthwhile and you do it very, very well. When you become others-centered. I'd like to close with a story by Leo Tolstoy. It's a short story entitled, "How Much Land Does a Man Need?" In this story, one fellow is given the opportunity to walk around a great piece of land. And another fellow challenges him. For the price of 1,000 rubles, he can acquire all the land that he can walk around in a day. But the only requirement is he must return before sundown. The man, of course, is excited about this opportunity, and he begins to walk and walk and walk. He walks as far as he can. The sun goes up into midday. He begins to think that it's coming close to the time he needs to turn around. But he walks a little further to make sure he gets all the land that he can for the 1,000 rubles. The sun makes its way down to the western sky. And as he begins to turn around, he becomes frantic, wondering if he'll make it back before the sun goes down at night. He continues to walk, and then as the sun gets closer to the horizon, he begins to run harder, run faster. He comes closer to his destination, and as he arrives, he makes it home just before the sun sets. He's achieved what he set out to achieve. But as he crosses the line, he falls over dead. All of the land that he would have gotten is now no longer his. And the moral of the story that Leo Tolstoy tells us is that now, after all this work, the only land that the man needed was a plot 6 foot by 3 foot by 6 foot deep. There are so many places to seek pleasure and joy in life, but so many of them provide nothing but heartache. Let me challenge you as you search, as you look for the real joy in life. Try Christ. Seek out what He has provided for us. Try the simple things. Give your life to something that is bigger than you.
Soldiers of Christ, arise and put your armor on. Strong in the strength which God supplies. Strong in the strength which God supplies through His beloved Son. Strong in the Lord of
Our thanks to John Tyson Jr. for being with us today and bringing us this message on the serendipity of joy. If you'd like a free audio cassette of this message, just write us and we'll be happy to send you one. I'd also like to mention that, Lord willing, 2 weeks from today, Avon Malone will begin a brief series on the book of Philippians. If you'd like one of the study booklets, ask for that also when you write. Just ask for the Philippians study booklet. As I close today's program, I want to pay tribute to a very special group of people, the Christians that worship at Lakewood Village in Fort Worth. They have supported this program so wonderfully. I'm sure they'd be happy for you to visit them at any time. Now, Lakewood Village is located at 5100 Randall Mill Road in Fort Worth, and their Sunday morning worship service is at 10:30 a.m. Now, until next week, may God continue to bless you.
This has been The Truth in Love, sponsored by the Churches of Christ of the North Texas area. For a copy of today's program, additional information, or Bible correspondence course at no charge to you, please write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. Once again, write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. We invite you to attend the Church of Christ in your area. Join us again next Sunday at the same time for The Truth in Love.